From the journalists at the Tennessee Firefly, this is On the Fly, your bi-weekly deep dive into the important education issues you need to know about. I'm Firefly Managing Editor Sky Arnold, standing by outside the Tennessee State Capitol, where lawmakers are returning for this week's special session. One key figure is going to be the chair of the new House Education Committee, Representative Mark White. Firefly contributor Steven Bergman recently sat down with him to talk a little Tennessee education history and his proposals for state intervention with the Memphis-Shelby County School District.
So let's kind of talk about the history. A lot's happened since 2010. You know, when you came in office in 2010, what did education look like in Tennessee, and kind of how have we gotten to where we are today in 2010?
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of great leaders. You know, at the end of the Governor Bredesen, where we had, you know, Race to the Top, and then we had Governor Bill Haslam come in for 8 years, who was very focused on education, and continued on with Governor Bill Lee. I think it was prior to 2007, you know, before Tennessee went to the higher standards, we had our end of course testing at the time, and we were telling our students and our parents that pretty much average, you're doing about 96% pretty well in your course matter. You mentioned NAEP. NAEP is the Nation's Report Card, which is a test that we give to all 50 states and students all across. On the NAEP test scores that were coming back, we were only 34%.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That's what we call it, the honesty gap.
The honesty gap. Yeah. So we were, you know, truth in advertising. So Governor Bill Haslam came in 2011, and we increased our standards to higher standards, college and career ready, started testing to those standards. And then by 2017, we actually were recognized by NAEP as the fastest improving state in the nation in our reading, math, and science scores. And so we put a focus on that. The biggest challenge as you going forward that I see, having been here now 15 years, is transition when new members come in, and education is a complex thing, you know, is trying to move the needle on third grade reading proficiency, making sure when they graduate, they're able to move on to a trade school. Give you some figures. Right now, one reason we passed the third grade retention bill in January 2021 is across the board, and you can debate this based upon certain tests, but only 1 out of 3 of the students are reading proficiently.
Yeah.
And that's true pretty much in math, even a little bit less in that. So if 1 out of 3 at third grade on the scores are reading proficiently, and then when we get out of high school and you want to go into a trade school, community college, or college, 2 out of 3 were having to take remediation courses. So it never changed. Yeah. That one out of 3 all the way through, the 2 out of 3 never did catch up, and so they're taking remediation courses. So that's why you've got to stay focused on this every year.
And accountability is always it's difficult for folks to understand the importance of it. But you know, when we think about accountability in all parts of the education system, why do you think it's so important, and why do we need that in place?
Well, at some point in time, you got to go time out. And we understood, you know, I heard all the debate on both sides about, you know, parents were upset, school districts are upset. In 2011, the General Assembly did pass a third grade retention bill. The biggest difference was we said if a child is not reading proficiently, you need to look at it as a district of holding them back, and or putting in place a system where they can move on. But we left it up to the districts to do it, and nothing changed. Well, I can see why the district didn't do it. The pushback we got from the state, they were getting the same pushback. Well, you're not going to hold my child back, you know, and everything. But I think I'm glad we did it. Now, we did it in January 2021. 2020 was pretty much virtual school in most areas across the state. The kids had been out, so we realized there was learning loss, so we're trying to figure out how to really, so we just said time out, we know this is an issue, know there's a lot of factors around it, but let's just focus on this. And it came about where we got the tutoring in place. We used the federal ESSER money for tutoring and summer school. And we really put in place, because we did, once again, hold a standard. And we have 9 benchmark or 9 waivers that you can move a child on. I had one parent call me and says, or they said, well, you're not going to hold my child back. I went down to the school and I said, he's doing quite well in these tests. I want to move on. Well, you got parent involvement. That's exactly what we want and we need.
Crucial.
So every parent's got to have a special involvement in their child's education. And that's why it gets so personal a lot of times, and rightfully so.
So we'll pivot a little bit now and talk a little bit about, of course, a critical component of student success is making sure that we have some great folks in the classroom, great educators, and that we're supporting our teachers. But right now, of course, we are facing some issues in Tennessee when it comes to the educator labor market.
Right.
We're having some critical shortage areas, especially in our rural districts. We're seeing historic, understaffed, and we're having to cover down with temporary permits oftentimes. And we might even be seeing a retention cliff with some educators once some of those most senior educators start to retire.
Yeah.
What are some of the fixes that we can do as a state to alleviate and kind of provide some, maybe even immediate remedy for that?
Yeah, well, I am a big believer that whenever the going gets tough and the challenges there, never dumb it down. Because we got to a certain level because we saw issues. Let's go back decades, let's go back years, and say the reason we changed something is because we weren't hitting the mark before. So we do put certain things in place over the years and over the decades. So let's don't go back to where we were. But the challenge in teaching right now, a lot of our schools, I'm from the Memphis-Shelby County area, there's a great teacher shortage in the municipal schools of our Memphis-Shelby County schools. Not our municipal schools, they are doing faring better. So we're looking at a lot of legislation right now. A lot of times you just need to get the kinks out of the way. We passed a bill a number of years ago that you can put a put a teacher on permit into the classroom. Well, what are the challenges? I'm working with agencies like SCORE and the AIRS Foundation and talking to those in higher education. Are there obstacles in the way that's preventing a teacher that goes into the classroom and say on a permit, and they teach for 3 years on that permit, which is what we put into the law? Should that not account for something, if they've got to go back to higher education, get that 18 hours of pedagogy to be endorsed in a certain, or licensed in a certain subject, should that 3 years that they're teaching on a permit also count for something, So we're looking at that and just getting some things out of the way that may be conflicting. We also need waivers. I got a call from Rutherford County this past summer where they have a highly qualified, I think it is, if I'm relaying this right, like a highly qualified endorsed teacher that they can move over to another endorsement, but they can't because of the licensure or waiver requirements. But they can put a permanent teacher in there who knows nothing about that subject matter. So I think we just got to get some kinks out of the way. Some of the state board can do, some we need legislation. So we're definitely looking at the teacher pipeline, trying to make it easier.
So when we talk about some of these temporary and these 3-year permits, they're great and they can really help fill some critical gaps, especially in a lot of your rural districts. And I think when we talk about those, really the long-term goal should be that they're not a transient position, that these folks that were getting into the classroom and they're getting that experience, and if they could use that experience towards meeting those conditions for a professional licensure path, ultimately that's the goal, is to keep good folks in the classroom.
Right. Once you have someone in the classroom and they start gaining experience, for example, let me give you a personal experience. When I graduated from my University of Memphis with my teaching degree, of course, one of the last things you do is your student teaching. Well, the school that I graduated from wanted to hire me teach full-time. Well, the university allowed that full-time teaching in the classroom to count as my student teaching. And for the first semester, they still came over and they kind of monitored me and did that, use that. But what it did, my point being, it put me in the classroom and I was teaching 7th graders and I found out I loved it. And it kept me in the classroom the next 5 years. So if we can get someone in the classroom and support that, sometimes we make it too difficult in many ways.
Barriers to entry.
And barriers to entry, but once you've got one in there, do everything you can to keep them. Don't make them, well, they had that 1 year, say, permit or whatever, and then they're gone. Once they go, and then if they get into the workforce somewhere else, they may never come back.
They may never come back.
So let's keep them as long as we can.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So we'll kind of pivot to one final thing here. Of course, we have some ongoing kind of issues with the Memphis County or Memphis-Shelby County School Board and superintendent related things there. What are you hearing on that? What do you see moving forward, and what do you hope happens in that situation?
I've lived in Memphis since 1966. I moved there as about a middle teenager, 16 years old. Memphis is a wonderful community, great people, great assets and things. We are experiencing two issues right now. One is crime, youth crime more than anything, and an educational system that is not functioning the way it should. Now, we actually have 8 school districts in Shelby County now. You know, we have the 6 municipals, the suburbs. We have Memphis-Shelby County School System, the largest one of 100,000. Then we created the University of Memphis is now, through their campus school, an LEA, a school district. So I believe in competition for one thing. So the challenges are many. With 100,000 students, the figures are right now their proficiency in reading is 23%, not acceptable. Math proficiency 17%, not acceptable. And we're not moving the needle down there. And then when you have issues like right now where the school board now wants to remove the superintendent for whatever reason, after 8 months on the job, when before that you had an interim there for a year and a half that you didn't replace. So this, if the school board does remove this particular superintendent, that will be 3 superintendents within 2 years, 3 years. We've got to have more consistency, and so we've got to be addressing the main issues, which is performance. We have, out of 100,000 students, approximately, we have a lot of chronic absenteeism. We have graduating every year into the Memphis market 8,000 18-year-olds from 12th grade. We have Louisville City coming in, already in. We have Elon Musk putting the faith into our area to put XAI. And now I read the other day where there's a lot of digital companies coming in around that. So the educational and the workforce opportunity in the future is great in our area. But whenever only 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 in math are coming out of high school ready to move into the workforce or higher education, it's not happening. We're losing too many students. Out of 8,000, you're at 2,000 that are ready to move on. There's where your crime is coming from. Because if you can't get a job and you're a young person, you become frustrated, and then you can be grabbed for the wrong reasons. So I'm at the point now where whatever the school board does, whatever the superintendent does, I'm looking at ways that the state can intervene in some way and say we've got to have better management. We've got to bring things up. We have too many school buildings that young people in the building, that the deferred maintenance is affecting their education. That's going on. So there's just so many challenges, and having been in Memphis for so long, I think it's time that we, from the state level, look at ways that we can intervene to put us on the right track. Yeah.
And I think you really spoke to a great point there too. It would seem to me that at a time like this, in a district like massive district like Memphis-Shelby County Schools, having some continuity and leadership is key right now. And the last thing we need is it would be a new mix-up or something like that. But ultimately, school boards do have some local control over those issues as it currently stands.
It is, and there's the challenges. These are elected boards, and we can't interfere with that. But we can base things on performance. And this has been going on for too long. We fund the TISA formula for the Memphis-Shelby County Schools is $900 million. That's more than any other district in the state gets. And so we have a responsibility from a statewide that money is used appropriately, and that we are moving the needle on our young people.
That's it for this edition of On the Fly. Catch us bi-monthly where you get your podcasts. I'm Sky Arnold.